Good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Ligwetsi Mahau, and I serve as the Link and Learn activity lead for the South-South Learning Network. On behalf of the SSLN, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this exciting session. Before we begin, please note that live interpretation is available, so please select your preferred language in order to fully engage with today's discussion. We'd also love to get to know you better, so please introduce yourself in the chat and indicate your preferred pronouns. Today's session will be focusing on programming with transgender and gender diverse individuals, a critical and evolving area identified by many SSLN countries as an area in need of strengthening. To date, 7 countries have completed our transgender PSAT, which has highlighted significant gaps in HIV programming within those countries. We are honored to have with us today GATE, the Global Action for Trans Equality, a trans-led advocacy organization known for its significant contribution to human rights and health across various nations, including some participating in today's session. We will also have presenters from Botswana, Zimbabwe, Malawi, and Cote d'Ivoire, who will be sharing insights on overcoming barriers to prevention and the impactful work of community-led organizations in their respective countries. Following the presentations, we will open the floor for a Q&A session. Please feel free to raise your hand or type your questions in the chat. Additionally, we'll conduct a Mentimeter survey to gauge your views on the challenges faced in transgender programming in your country and explore how the SSLN can help bridge these gaps. Without further ado, I'll hand over to Anil from GATE, who will be leading today's session. Thank you.
So hi, everyone, and welcome. It's great to see so many people here today. Please could you introduce yourselves, put your name and pronouns in the chat, and we'll get to know everyone who's in the meeting better. Also to say that we are going to have a question and answer session, which I hope we will be having a very good conversation during that session. So if you have got any questions or comments while we are in the process of doing presentations, you're welcome to note them down in the chat or to save them for afterwards for the Q&A session. And we will try to get as many thoughts on the topic as possible. But just to say from our side, a warm welcome to everyone who's going to be here. If we can move on to the next slide, please. So today we're talking about programming with the trans and gender diverse community, which is a large topic, and I'm hoping that this will just be an introductory session, following which we can identify some more specific topics to deal with in future sessions. But just to say, I'm Anil Padavartan. My pronouns are he and she. I'm based in South Africa. I'm the health programs lead at GATE. And if we can move to the next slide, please. I can introduce GATE, which is the organization I work with, an international advocacy organization, which is working towards justice and equality for trans, gender diverse, and intersex communities. Next slide, please. The focus of our work is on creating a world that is free from human rights violations based on gender identity, gender expression, and sex characteristics. Through empowerment, political advocacy, and movement building, we campaign for justice and equality for trans, gender diverse, and intersex people. So that's a bit about who I am and GATE as an organization. Please, if we can move to the next slide. But what we're going to be talking about today is the trans and gender diverse community in terms of HIV prevention programming. And so I'm going to be doing a very brief overview from an international perspective, but then I'm going to be handing over to our partner organizations and your partner organizations who are the real experts in this subject and who are going to be talking about what is happening in the various country contexts, the barriers that community members are facing, and what community-led organizations are doing in terms of addressing these barriers. But to start with, what do we mean when we're talking about the trans and gender diverse community? So just to give some context, trans and gender diverse are terms that are used to describe a very wide range of identities of people whose gender identity differs from their sex assigned at birth. So when I'm using the terms trans and gender diverse in this presentation, I'm really referring to people, to a broad range of gender identities, to people whose gender identity and expression or behavior does not conform to those typically associated with the sex that they were assigned at birth. And this can include binary gender identities such as trans men and trans women, also gender identities that fall outside of the binary, such as gender non-conforming persons, non-binary persons, gender fluid persons, and also culturally specific gender identities that don't conform to Western or colonial binaries, such as the Hijra communities, Two-Spirit people, and Fa'afafini people. And this is an acknowledgement of the fact that around the world, there are many cultural traditions that recognize gender identities other than those assigned at birth, and there are different terminologies that are used in different cultural contexts. Next slide, please. In terms of the trans and gender diverse community as a key population in the HIV response, UNAIDS defines a key population as groups that are particularly vulnerable to HIV and also frequently lack adequate access to services. And the reason why working with key populations is important is because it's not possible for us to meet global targets and to end HIV as a public health threat if we exclude the communities who are in fact the most vulnerable to HIV. In terms of the trans and gender diverse community, WHO estimates that HIV prevalence in trans women is around 28.4% in Eastern and Southern Africa and 13.5% in West and Central Africa. But other studies have found much higher prevalence levels in the African context. For example, a recent study in South Africa found prevalence rates amongst transgender women of color of between 46% and 63% across 3 South African cities. So we are talking about extremely high HIV prevalence levels. And this is why there has been a dedicated focus to transgender women. But there is also emerging data that shows that trans men and other gender diverse persons are also at increased risk of HIV. Trans men and gender diverse persons assigned female at birth are almost 7 times more likely than other individuals in the general population to be HIV positive, with estimates of up to 38% HIV prevalence for trans men sex workers in Zimbabwe. And that's also from a recent study. Next slide, please. Research that we at GATE have conducted, and that this is with organizations across global regions, is that in general, HIV and STI prevention is not targeted to the specific needs of the trans and gender diverse community. Where HIV prevention services are available, they are often focused on men who have sex with men as a key population. And these services might sometimes include a focus on trans and gender diverse persons, particularly trans women, but they're often not appropriate to the trans and gender diverse community and don't address or respect the specific identities and needs of trans and gender diverse persons. And while PrEP is what is becoming more available in HIV prevention initiatives around the world, it's still widely inaccessible for the trans community, in part due to the slow rollout but also because of specific issues related to access to health services for the trans and gender diverse community, which I'm going to talk a bit more about in detail in the next slide. But just to say that an additional barrier in terms of programming with trans and gender diverse community is the lack of data, including the lack of reliable population size estimates, exclusion from biobehavioral surveys, and the lack of disaggregated data collection in health systems. So we often don't have reliable baseline estimates to work from. Next slide, please. So as I said, besides having barriers to access to HIV services, trans and gender diverse community members often face barriers in accessing the health system at all. Trans and gender diverse community members experience systemic marginalization, which both increases vulnerability to HIV and at the same time makes it more difficult to access prevention services. And criminalization and discrimination are major barriers to access to health services, and particularly for HIV and sexual health services, because those are exactly the contexts in which people's gender identities and sexual orientation come under scrutiny, and that is where people fear being exposed either to discrimination or in criminalized contexts to prosecution. And these remain serious barriers to access to care. In general, trans and gender diverse community members also experience very high levels of violence, including gender-based violence, homelessness due to family rejection, and lack of access to educational and employment opportunities. And these all result in further socioeconomic marginalization, which in turn makes it more difficult to access healthcare services. And in addition to this, gender-affirming healthcare services, which are often an important entry point into the health system for trans and gender diverse community members, are not available in many African countries. Next slide, please. So to address these barriers, it's really vital to work with community-led organizations. Around the world, the trans and gender diverse community has a proud history of health rights activism and community organizing. And then also increasingly, community-led organizations are involved in research projects in order to bridge the gaps that exist in terms of data. And some of the studies that I've just quoted were studies that were undertaken in partnership with community-led organizations. Community-led organizations are also at the front line of emergency situations and pandemic responses. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw trans-led organizations across Africa implementing emergency responses and providing support to community members who were not able to access state services or family support. And this was extremely important in ensuring that community members could remain connected to HIV testing, treatment, and prevention services during the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide, please. Community-led organizations are active in two broad areas in the HIV response. First of all, in terms of community-led service provision, and we'll see that there are community-led organizations that are involved in outreach, in community education, in providing psychosocial support, in conducting community-led monitoring, in running drop-in centers, and other levels of service provision. But importantly, community-led organizations are also at the forefront of advocacy for access to health rights and improving the inclusion of trans and gender diverse community members in national HIV responses. And there are a lot of projects at the moment working on making sure that the priorities of key populations are included in national HIV responses. Research also shows that community-led responses are highly effective in reaching marginalized communities, especially in contexts when those marginalized communities are having barriers to accessing the mainstream health services. Next slide, please. So In the next two slides, and I'm going to ask the organizers to make these slides available to you after the presentation, I've put together a couple of helpful resources. But just to say, there are a lot of resources available, far too much to include in a PowerPoint presentation. So I'm just going to give an overview of some of the ones that I've identified that might be useful. But if you do need access to more research papers or online resources, please contact me and I'm very, very happy to send them through to you. The first resource that I want to mention is that we at GATE have developed a Trans 101 online course. This course is specifically targeted at healthcare providers, at government officials, and at international organizations working with HIV. And the aim of the course is to provide knowledge on the trans and gender diverse community and how to engage the trans and gender diverse community in the course of the HIV response. This is a really helpful resource, and it's as an online course. You're welcome to register for the course and complete it in your own time. But if there is a big interest in the course from this group, at GATE, we are very happy to set up a dedicated online classroom where there would be an opportunity for people to share discussion groups and for you to be able to share the link and other resources with colleagues. So please do let us know if you would be interested in being part of a shared classroom on this. In addition to this, we've got a whole lot of other resources on our website, including our brand new Trans Men and HIV in the Global HIV Response Policy Brief. This is a document that provides basic knowledge on the importance of including trans men and other persons assigned female at birth in the HIV response. It's available on our website. And I've also included links to some other fundamental documents that might be of use. Next slide, please. So these are some of the other useful research papers that might help to inform your work around this area. And I've included the latest in a series of research papers that are showing that PrEP is safe and effective for trans and gender diverse persons who are on hormone treatment. So that is it in terms of my presentation. We're going to now have a very short video insert, and then I'm going to hand over, as I said, to the real experts, which is my colleagues in the in-country community-led organizations. Thanks so much. Trans and gender diverse persons are one of the most vulnerable groups with regards to HIV worldwide. And that is because our community members are one of the most marginalized communities.
There has been a lot of discrimination for the trans communities and no involvement in different conferences or activities. The trans persons have been discriminated and pushed away.
The hospital, clinic, they're not much aware about the transgender issues.
HIV prevalence of 6.2% is among the transgender people in Kathmandu Valley, and outside of the Kathmandu Valley, 8.2%. So this prevalence rate is very high among the trans community.
Being able to access HIV testing, prevention and services comes with additional barriers for the trans and gender diverse community.
When transgender people go to the hospital, the doctor and then the services people are the teasing and the laughing.
So there is a healthcare system that discriminates the transgender people and trans diverse people.
If we look at the rate at which the trans masculine persons have been pushed away, their voices have been stepped on, there has been silence for the trans masculine persons.
Just accessing the healthcare system is a major challenge for trans and gender diverse community members.
In our country, medical proof is requirement to access the citizenship, and most of the transgender people do not have the citizenship, and it's very difficult to go to the hospital to register the appointment.
This is a space that we need to come and raise our voices so that people can hear and know about us and understand that we exist.
To be able to meet
the global HIV targets, we need to be able to ensure the meaningful inclusion of the trans and gender diverse community in the global AIDS response.
So thanks so much everyone for watching that video. For those of you who are going to be at the AIDS conference later this year, we are going to be having a couple of seminars around the issues facing trans and gender diverse communities around the world. And we're going to also be showcasing some latest research. And we would love to connect with you there if you are able to make it into that space. But now I would like to hand over to Nelly from Botswana to give us an overview of what is happening in terms of the trans and gender diverse community in that country.
Thank you, Anil, for that beautiful presentation. And a good afternoon to fellow colleagues, partners, and everyone present here today. May I please do this with my camera off?
Yes, please go ahead. I know that you have bandwidth issues.
Yes. Okay. So let me start my presentation. My name's Nelly Pabera. I am the co-founder and co-director of Botswana Trans Initiative. Botswana Trans Initiative is a trans-led non-governmental trust. Thank you. Yeah. Am I audible?
Hi, Nelly, we can hear you now. Please go ahead.
Hello. Okay. Anil says they can hear me. Okay. So I was saying our organization is a trans-led organization. We co-founded this organization because we had within that trans people are being misrepresented, and the information that goes to media is unrepresentative of our honest experiences. And we also only see decision makers, and trans people in Botswana, despite the 2017 Ricky Hositau and ND cases that set precedents for the recognition, the legal gender recognition of trans people in Botswana. So 2021 was our start year where we were BTI enough to be able to start our operational work. Moving on, our objectives as BTI include evidence-based advocacy for the promotion of human rights, inclusive and recognizing the contribution of trans and gender diverse people to the rich history of Botswana. Our objectives also include targeting stakeholder engagement and trans community for an effective review of laws and policies. This means us being, you may call it an intermediary or a mitigator, but what we do is within our strategy is creating safe spaces for policy discussions with different government departments to advance trans people's representation and ourselves being in these spaces, our voices being heard and recognized. And then one other objective is socioeconomic empowerment and interventions for the capacity building of trans and gender diverse people, developing sustainable streams of income for themselves, as well as, last but not least, advocacy for health policies to ensure the full access and inclusion of health services for trans persons. So within our 2 years of operation as BTI, what we have been able to accumulate through our strategic partnerships was a relationship with Positive Vibes. Positive Vibes is a Namibian registered organization working in Southern and Eastern Africa, who have helped us get into a platform called Living the Dream, also known as Imaki. And through Living the Dream, we were able to get some data, develop some data for our evidence, for our information on trans people's experiences, accessing HIV-related services. And what we have also been able to do through the Living the Dream project was engage the district health management team and the Ministry of Health for a strategic way of advancing inclusion of trans people in our public health facilities. And so through the Living the Dream, we have a platform called Mabox, which we have been using in one health facility in Gaborone. And through that particular platform, Mabox, we were able to also get data from 465 people who are in the local area close to that particular facility. And we are just coming from a data analysis process which was happening last month. And I will share this information with Anil for them to share with you. I don't know if I'm answering the question or if I'm bringing the context clearly, but I'm hoping that you are able to grasp some of the work that we are doing and get context. Our realization from the Mabox platform, this is a community-led monitoring platform, which we were introduced to by Positive Vibes, was that trans people still are unable to access services at public health facilities. And you can imagine from 465 entries, only having one trans person having used the platform, what that then reflects in terms of access to services for trans people. Because one thing that we've also realized is that our community still goes to private health facilities to access services, and those coming at high prices and inaccessible for some of our community members. Our community is still increasingly vulnerable, and from the Mabox platform, we also realized that our community is quite poor in awareness of our human rights. So what we've had to do is also start developing informational material that we can share with our community, for our community to be the ones who amplify the voice of trans people, for trans people to be the ones who lead these discussions around exclusion, around human rights, and also one thing that we found within the Living the Dream Mabox platform was that there's a considerable distance and discrepancy between policies developed at high levels of government and strategy and a lived experience at local level where as trans people, you find that people are going to private facilities, but then these services, if policies were in line and were recognizing the lived experiences of people on the ground, then the impact would have been reflected and the intention would have been highlighted clearly as to how we are moving strategically to include trans people. So Botswana is now in its third role of the BBSS, and fortunate enough, BTI has been able to mobilize some trans people to, participate in this survey and also influence others who are in Gaborone and the outskirts of Gaborone to participate. One thing I can bring to your attention about the BBSS that is happening right now is that it's different from the previous BBSS that was happening in 2017 in Botswana, where trans women were the only ones who were being tested and being screened for HIV and STIs. And this time around, through our partnership and strategic engagements, we've been able to also ensure that trans men are involved and included into this rollout or in this third survey of the BBS, with the hope that the information can come out with more experiences of trans people, and trans men can also see their voices being amplified into platforms that seek to create change or develop policies that recognize what is happening on the ground. What we've also seen from the BBSS is that health workers still need support, capacitation, a lot of capacitation when it comes to inclusion, when it comes to embracing difference and humility, dealing with clients or patients who are different from what can be considered the norm or could be considered the norm. So we are not backing down, even though we are 2 years old from this challenge. We are working hand in hand with FHI Botswana to promote and elevate awareness on trans issues. Like for the recent BBSS, we had a trainer coming all the way from our organization BTI, who was able to sensitize healthcare providers on trans people's experiences and on the overall sexual orientation, gender, identity expression, sexual characteristics, and from there we could see that there was hope for a shift in creating safe environments for trans people. I think one thing I can add at this point is that, lastly, is that gender affirming healthcare continues to be unavailable or inaccessible for trans people across Africa or across the SADC region. And we can only work in collaboration and in partnership with multi-sectoral organizations to advance inclusion, to advance the trans people. So we need to be very introspect even ourselves as to how we are going to meaningfully make sure that trans people are able to access STD, STI screenings and tests, and how then do we ensure that through even that entry point of HIV, STI, STD testing, screening, how then do we elevate our advocacy to ensure that there is gender affirming healthcare at the end of the day, to avoid people going for black market hormonal therapy, or people ending up committing. I mean, gender affirming healthcare has a huge impact on our mental health as trans people. So I'm hoping that within this discussion, as we move forward, we can also come to realize that as much as we want to use HIV/AIDS as an entry point, we also need to be strategic in how we.
Nelly, sorry, I think we lost you again, but just to say that was an excellent presentation and we really, really appreciate it. I'm now going to hand over to B. Meki from Zimbabwe to give a country context on the situation in Zimbabwe for the trans and gender diverse community. Over to you, B.
Hello, everyone. My apology. I was trying to look for the mic, but I hope everybody's well. So my presentation of Zimbabwe context is Zimbabwe when it comes to trans community, when it comes to the general LGBTIQ, it's still sort of like they haven't accepted, but it's workable with the Ministry of Health and other partners. So from my presentation, let's go to the next chapter. My presentation goes, I'm from TS Trans and Intersex Rise in Zimbabwe. In Zimbabwe, we have about 3 partners. We have Treat Trans and Research, which is in Bulawayo, which is located in Bulawayo. We have Transmart, which is also in Harare. But when it comes to Global Fund, we work under TCZ, which is Trans Coalition of Zimbabwe. This is under Global Fund where we implement in different districts, provinces, like TS is representing in Manicaland, Bulawayo, the street where SEM is, and also Harare, that's Transmart. So as TS, we have about 7 thematic areas which have expanded, which we work around on to the community of trans and intersex communities, transgender diversities. We have family and friends programs that we line up for family and friends, those who are close to us, also partners. Maybe it's an organization which is also wanting to support us in other activities. We also have information and education where we do sensitization when we reach out to other organizations, where we work with Ministry of Health or National AIDS Council on sensitization on public health service deliverance. Then also we have religion and culture, where we also saw that there is no human being with that aspect of faith or with aspect of tradition, since we are Africans. So we create that space where we engage with the religion leaders, we engage with cultural leaders, chief and others, sangomas, for those who are into sangoma, so that our community is also catered in all directions. We have legal. On legal, we do referral. We have partner organization that we work with, GAUs. It depends which province is the case, where we refer because they have a lawyer. We also refer to Treat because they have also a legal lawyer, and SRC who are in Bulawayo. In other areas, we just do referral. Livelihood, we look at the talents of the community and try to market the talents of the community and try to elevate what they know. Because what we have discovered is that since the grants under USAID and Global Fund, we just seem to see community applying as peer educators, and they take about 10 years being educator. And to us, that's not expanding, that's not empowerment, that's nothing. We want them to be empowered. The moment they are peer educators, they should be at least 2 to 3 years somewhere there. And then they apply for something that is very important, where they can go into other industrial places. So we do career guidance and other programs under that pillar, under that thematic area. We have healthy. On health, let me mention it lastly. We have research. We don't do research as such, but when we have partners who want to do research, we also work with them. Recently, we had the UNAIDS under gender dynamics. Now we had another one which we were conducting, which ended on Sunday, which was Tsiritsi, which is based on gender-based violence, IPV, what's really happening in the houses, a lot that came out. So on research, we work with different particular, because when we talk about research, it's more about HIV, or is it affected or infected. Then on research, before I go anyway, Zimbabwe is going to be holding a BBS. Unfortunately, since I think from the first presenter, we heard about trans men being left behind. We had fought, me and Sam had fought for trans men to have a little portion for that size estimation, which is going to be happening in Zimbabwe. But unfortunately, it was voted out. And I don't know, this is a concern for me when it comes to funders. It would be proper if we could plan what to do with the donors, to talk to them, how to engage them, to also not leave another group behind. So yeah, that's the good news that we have. This year we're going to be receiving a size estimation for trans women, but it's a bad news for us because we wanted us and trans men also side by side so that we can have data to program. On healthy, we said we do referral. We work with partners who are SESHA. SESHA also deals with clinical linkages. It deals with mostly on sex workers. So on our working environment, we also have conducted trans people who identify as who work as sex workers to be also on that program. And it works because for SESHA, they work almost like on Zimbabwe National, and they do have mobile clinics, highway clinics, which is an easier aspect for our community members who don't want to be outed, who don't want to be noticed when they are receiving their health services. So those are the 7 thematic areas. Next. What we do as TS right now, since last year in December, we started opening TS One Stop Center, which is where community members come into the space. They have edutainment, they have a lot of things. It's a room where you feel safe, where you talk, where we discuss something else, which is not rather than only HIV, but something else where they feel it's home. They come, there's a corner where we call it pause, where a person can dress up what they like, because at home they are not allowed to wear. And when they're coming from a ghetto place, they can't come wearing their dresses. Myself, I can't come wearing a dress at work, but I would love that. But unfortunately, if I'm using public transport, it's an harassment or violation. What happens according to the country context of their own back mind. So we have also creativity activities where we ask community members to draw and to just enlighten the community member, not to feel like they're trapped. We are coming for focus group only, or you're just coming for, we create a space where they are doing whatever they're doing. If we're doing focus group, we're doing focus group. Those who want to join, they may join. Those who don't want to join, they might be watching TV or sourcing or reading. Those are the things that we have. When it comes to mental wellness, we have some community members that we selected. I think under TS, we only have 4 friendly bench counselors. We adopted the friendly bench counselor session as well. But the problem is that the context in their manual doesn't speak to the specifically trans people in their identities. So sometimes we use Lilo to try to approach community members, because we always have issues of community members breaking down, having family issues, having themselves on issues of crisis of their identities. We also have social platforms on social media. We have WhatsApp groups accordingly to where they are living. Also WhatsApp group on a national level where we communicate, where we have micro planners and community advocates putting discussions, and we discuss. And if we see any article talking particularly on anything that needs our attention, we discuss them in those social places. Right. We also have sports. Yeah. Trans men, you like sports a lot, you like drinking and going out and all those. We create those spaces because we have seen that we're lacking other groups behind. Trans women, yeah, sometimes they do acknowledge having lessons and all that, but also they need that space. We have netball teams that we have. Sometimes we sponsor, sometimes we engage them when we're doing discussion for them to be in the space. On soccer, we create spaces where they can also play with other youth organizations. Then as TS, we are not a clinical practitioners. We are more of a referral to partners such as SESHA. We talked about SESHA. We have also public health sectors that were nominated by the Ministry of Health. We were given a list who to work with in different spaces. So it's easier that way to work with for the key vulnerable population. We work with collaboration with different organizations, which are also not trans specifically, but with other mandate, but if they align into our vision. Sensitization, that's the other line of work that we do. Let's go to the sector. So next page. So on this one, I'm just showing you some of our rooms. That the first picture is Harare. This is Harare, one-stop center where community members were celebrating Trans Day of Visibility. Then the second one is in Bulawayo, where we're having also discussion on Kunjera literacy session. Unfortunately, sorry, we do put our own Zimbabwean context names and sometimes we do use English. But Kunjera, it only means learning on literacy. Learning on literacy. When we talk about literacy, we didn't only want to end on HIV, because literacy, we talk about PrEP, we talk about injectable drugs and all that. Let's go to the next page. Then on activities, we have Chinache Madzimai. This is a program that only caters for 25 people. It's for Ladies' Day. Trans women who identify as women, if you're an intersex person who just identify as intersex as women, or maybe we do also acknowledge that in our space sometimes with gay bottoms who come into the space, is where we talk about our body autonomies. We talk about a lot of things that are happening at home. How are we safe? How are we not safe? What are the health challenges? We talk about, this is the space where we talk more about cancer, how, to those who are already in relationship, how to spice up your relationship. So sometimes we invite cis hetero women into the space to also tell us, as a mother, what do you expect your child to be if you have a child who tells you later on that I'm a trans identifying person. So we bring them in the space too, sometimes from other organizations such as Widows, where we invite them to also hear the mother love for those who no longer have the mothers. Shoto Cheva Roommate, that's a platform for trans men, African men who are gathering around the fire. It also caters for 25 people. It happens twice in a month. This program is where we hear trans men and they talk about their body autonomy in the absence of the trans women in the space, in the absence of the cis hetero women. Why? We wanted a space where they can feel comfortable to talk about their body autonomies, where they can also discuss issues of the health package. Is it variable for them or is not? What are their needs? This is a space where they gather issues pertaining to their own body autonomy or politics. Then we have Zvirimdariro, a gender-based violence discussion with community members. This is a discussion that we did, a project that we did under UNFPA, where it was under Spotlight Initiative when we were talking about gender-based violence under the Pillar 6, where women's movement. We were given the little grant on that. So we went around in rural areas. Unfortunately, we have in Zimbabwe, we have rural areas and big cities which are mixed up. So we did this program in Masvingo. It's a rural and urban community. Then also we had also Mutare, Rusape, those are like that. Then also Harare and Chitungwiza, Bulawayo and Gwelo. So we mixed up the groups. Then we have China and Choto Out Camp. That's a mental wellness program where we move community members from the city. We don't go and book them in a hotel. No. We look for 2 rooms where we could sleep together, discuss, celebrate, enjoying ourselves, having small exercises, having mountain views, where network is not reachable, where we try to put all the phones away, where we are just us, talking about yourself, trying to identify yourself and reaching out to another person. Then we have also a biblical study sessions where we invite religion leaders into our spaces. Before we do that, we make sure that we, according to which church, do we know the doctrines? How many people from that church before we invite the person? So that when he's basing on his issues, we also have somebody who understands the religion and the politics in the church. So we create those spaces. We have clinical partners. Let's go to the next slide. Right there, I'm standing in the middle of a rural and urban, which is a very political area that's in Masvingo, where we went to do sensitization to parents. As you can see, those are the parents, and we were surprised to see about 40 parents coming into the space to understand. So we used the entrance of HIV. We used also with a partner of National AIDS Council in Masvingo and Minister of Health. They were there present, and we were trying to use that linkage on gender-based violence, how it is also portraying IPV, how to protect the trans-identifying person. Unfortunately, from that, we only we received the good results of community members who were in different rural areas in Masvingo area. And it was great to engage with parents saying that we now understand from their aspects. Let's move to the next. Let's move to the next one. I don't know how did I do this. I put thank you in the middle of my presentation. Right. Those are the partners that we work with. SESHA. SESHA is a big organization on sex workers. It gives full services to the sex workers. Ministry of Health, National AIDS Council. National AIDS Council, we work with them also in Manicaland. We will also work with them in all districts where we are. Public Health Facility, GAUS, I think GAUS, you're familiar with it. TCZ, which is the Trans Coalition Zimbabwe, and TREAT. Those are the organizations that I have put in. And let's go to the other last presentation. Yeah, funding is coming from USAID, and you know USAID is more targeted on targets, and that's something that we also engaged USAID on issues to do with targets that sometimes it seems like we are pushing community to be HIV positive. Can we try to reduce such in targets and all that? So we've been given a platform where we decide to say that no, we don't want this number, we want this particular number, so that our community members or PH carers are not forced to run around and look for community members or push people taking their choices. Global Fund, that's one we do advocacy using that one on media, social, we engage journalists, we engage health service providers, we also engage our community members in the spaces. Gender Dynamics also assist with funding on programs which are not specifically on this, education, and also social and gender-based violence issues and patterning. So thank you very much. That's our presentation for Zimbabwe when it comes to, unfortunately for the policy, I didn't put issues on policies because we don't have a policy that protects the trans-identifying person. We only going to those health service providers as a backdoor. So as a recognized country, we are not recognized as citizen. So that's who we are in Zimbabwe. Thank you. Back to you, Annie.
Thank you so much, B, and that was a great presentation. Really appreciate it, and it's amazing to see the different types of work and the different ways that you're engaging with the community and with the health service providers. And that's also, I'm very glad that you've focused on the mental health wellness aspect, because that's a very important aspect as well. I'm now going to hand over. We're going to have some brief inputs also from Côte d'Ivoire. And I'm going to hand over to Inza. Over to you.
Allô? Allô, vous m'entendez? Oui, allô, bonjour à tous. Bonjour à toutes. Moi, c'est Enza Koulibaly de la Côte d'Ivoire, directrice exécutive de Fondi Gender. Je vous présente le contexte de la Côte d'Ivoire. En Côte d'Ivoire, bon, l'État ne statue pas sur la personne transgenre même en tant qu'individu. Il faut dire que par la porte, les progrès ont été faits par la porte du VIH. Et il n'y a même pas 3 ans que les personnes trans, c'est-à-dire les femmes trans, ont été prises comme cibles prioritaires à part entière, c'est-à-dire prioritaires dans le domaine de lutte contre le VIH-Sida. Concernant le travail au niveau de Fondi Gender, il faut dire que le seul financement qu'on a eu comme financement propre, c'est-à-dire financement dirigé par l'organisation, c'est le financement avec ONISIDA en 2021. Après ça, les autres financements qu'on a eu à travailler dans le domaine de VIH-Sida, c'était des financements assistés. Je m'explique. C'est-à-dire, bon, un partenaire bon, qui va postuler pour un projet, pour cette personne, ce partenaire inclut la cible transgenre dedans et lorsque le projet est accordé et ces partenaires-là viennent vers nous pour pouvoir faire la mise en œuvre. La mise en œuvre. Et ça, vraiment, bon, c'est vrai, c'est bien, on a des chiffres, mais c'est vraiment une grosse difficulté pour les organisations identitaires comme les organisations trans aussi, qui ont des potentiels aussi à pouvoir mettre en œuvre les activités. Et concernant la prise en charge des personnes transgenres, c'est vrai, il y a des progrès qui sont faits, mais il y a beaucoup de failles encore. Surtout pour les personnes transgenres qui ont perdu de vue, c'est-à-dire qui ont abandonné le traitement. C'est vraiment difficile, même si ces personnes sont retrouvées. Pour remettre ces personnes dans les soins, c'est vraiment très, très difficile parce que l'assistance n'est pas aussi adaptée que ça pour ces personnes-là. Et deuxième chose aussi, nos plus grands défis aussi, et ces toutes dernières années, je pense qu'il y a vraiment 3 mois de cela, on a eu au moins 4 cas comme ça où des personnes transgenres qui faisaient la maladie et même envoyées au SMIC, c'était vraiment difficile pour pouvoir faire interner ces personnes pour qu'elles puissent peut-être, entre parenthèses, mourir dignement. Et malheureusement, on était obligé de peut-être prendre ces personnes-là hébergées chez des personnes de la communauté, sans quand bien même qu'on sait, lorsqu'une personne fait la maladie ou est en phase finale, on sait déjà les problèmes de cancer et autres maladies qui viennent s'ajouter encore. Et malheureusement, les 4 cas dont je viens de vous citer là, toutes les personnes n'ont pas pu être récupérées. Ces personnes sont décédées. Ça, c'est un défi aussi. Il y a aussi le défi de pouvoir accompagner les personnes transgenres de troisième âge. Les personnes transgenres âgées qui, d'autres sont en sous-traitement ARV et d'autres non. Et c'est vraiment difficile de pouvoir accompagner des personnes comme ça, même ne serait-ce que les assister et les accompagner dans leurs tâches quotidiennes ou aussi besoin, essayer de les assister et tout ça. Et l'autre défi encore, ça sera de pouvoir faire le repérage. C'est vrai, bon, je pense que tous les services au niveau de la Côte d'Ivoire sont concentrés au niveau de la Ligue. C'est vrai qu'il y a des services qui sont faits au niveau de l'intérieur, mais il faut plus l'intensifier. Et l'un des objectifs de Fondi Gender, c'est d'aller en repérage. Aller à l'intérieur du pays, repérer des groupes de personnes transgenres et essayer d'évaluer les besoins et voir si possible les assister comme on le peut. Bon, c'est un peu ça ma présentation en tant qu'organisation Fondi Gender pour la Côte d'Ivoire. Je vous remercie.
Ok, d'accord. Je suis Madame Kouya Marie-Paul, je suis au programme national de lutte contre le sida ici en Côte d'Ivoire. Je suis au service en charge des populations hautement vulnérables et le point focal chargé de coordonner toutes les interventions menées à l'endroit des usagers de drogue et des personnes transgenres. Bon, là, comme on est dans le contexte de la Côte d'Ivoire, enchérir des propos de Madame la directrice Elsa Koulibaly, directrice exécutive de l'ONG Fondi Gender. Pour rappel, il faut dire qu'ici en Côte d'Ivoire, pendant longtemps, les personnes transgenres ont été toujours considérées comme des hommes ayant des rapports sexuels avec d'autres hommes. Et c'est en 2020 qu'une ONG ici en Côte d'Ivoire appelée Alliance Côte d'Ivoire a fait une étude. Et c'est à la suite de cette étude qu'on a pu faire vraiment la différence entre les HSH, les MSM et les personnes transgenres de par leur spécificité. Alors, moi, en tant que point focal ici au programme, j'ai essayé tant bien que mal, au vu de la prévalence vraiment élevée qu'a relevé cette étude à l'endroit des personnes transgenres estimée à 23,6%, ce qui a même entraîné, favorisé l'identification des personnes transgenres comme étant faisant partie intégrante des populations clés dans le plan stratégique national de notre pays. Et j'essaye, tant soit peu, de pouvoir coordonner toutes les interventions menées à l'endroit de cette cible et avec l'appui financier du Fonds mondial, nous avons pu élaborer le paquet minimum d'activités à l'endroit de cette cible, ainsi que les modules de formation pour pouvoir vraiment améliorer la prise en charge des personnes transgenres dans les centres de santé publics. Le problème qu'on a ici, c'est que la stigmatisation et la discrimination persistent à l'endroit de cette cible, et ce qui fait que la prise en charge n'est pas encore de qualité. Voilà, la prise en charge n'est pas encore de qualité, mais nous comptons former les prestataires de santé qui vont constituer un pool de formateurs, et c'est c'est avec ce pool-là que nous allons former les autres acteurs. Nous allons aussi, au travers de l'approche LILO, qui est une approche qui permet de déconstruire les idées, qui permet de briser les idées préconçues et les idées que se font la population générale, des populations clés en général et des personnes transgenres en particulier. Nous utiliserons cette approche pour pouvoir vraiment briser les idées préconçues pour que au moins les populations transgenres puissent être tolérées, puissent être acceptées au sein de la population générale, et ce qui va d'ailleurs faciliter la prise en charge clinique de ces personnes ici en Côte d'Ivoire. Donc, c'est ce que je voulais ajouter à la suite de la présentation de Madame la directrice Elsa Koulibaly. Je vous remercie.
Allô, on m'entend? Voilà. Donc, voilà, au niveau de la Côte d'Ivoire, nous avons un drop center qui est le centre de convivialité pour les LGBTQI en Côte d'Ivoire. Au niveau de nos centres, nous avons des chambres d'urgence spécifiquement appréhendées, adaptées à nos populations en genre, pour les permettre de vraiment donner envie à les envies et qui sont vraiment victimes de stigmatisation et de rejet dans la communauté et dans les familles. Il faut aussi dire qu'au sein de ce centre-là, de ce drop center, on fait la prise en charge holistique, l'écoute psychologique de tous ces transgenres-là, pour pouvoir vraiment trouver une réponse à leur santé mentale. Vraiment pour ajouter à tout ce qui a été déjà dit par Enza et par Manakouya, ajouter quand même, c'était pour vraiment ajouter un paquet minimum de ce qui était fait aussi au niveau des transgenres et toutes ces recommandations, toutes ces difficultés aussi que nous croisons. Je voulais juste apporter, c'était juste mon apport à cette causerie, à cet entretien. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very, very much. We really appreciate it. Thank you, colleagues from Côte d'Ivoire. In the interest of time, we were going to have a presentation also from Malawi, but we started a bit late. So our colleague from Malawi has indicated that he will be presenting in the next session that we organize in this series. And instead, we're going to move straight to the question and answer session, because I know that you have all been very patient during the presentations, but we'd like to now get your input. If you have got any questions, comments, anything you would like to add from your country contexts, this is the time. You're most welcome to either raise your hand or to put your questions in the chat. So over to all of you. No? I'm not sure if that's someone with a question. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. So to get the ball rolling, I am going to pick on someone, and my apologies for this. Prince from Malawi, I would just like to ask you a question. And the question is, what do you think is the major barrier in terms of HIV prevention for the trans and gender diverse community, whether in Malawi or in the rest of Africa? So over to you.
I've seen that you have put me on this spot. I think for me, I'll resonate to what the I think my friend from Botswana, basically on gender affirming healthcare. Hello.
Hi, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
All right, thank you. Thank you for putting me on the spot. I tried to run away from speaking today, but I think I'll try to speak to the first two presentations from Botswana and also from Zimbabwe in terms of the access to gender affirming healthcare and also the lack of gender recognition for trans people. So if you can see from what recognized in many of the Southern African countries, and this is a challenge in terms of accessing gender affirming health services, because it goes beyond from the key population friendly services. There are a lot of aspects. There are a lot of issues when we're talking about gender affirming healthcare. There's access to hormones, and I think in Malawi, the minimum package for trans people includes gender hormone replacement therapy, but the doses and the hormones are not easily accessible, even though the government has put the hormonal replacement therapy as a minimum standard for trans people. This is because as a country, transgender people are not recognized. So it's something that trans recognition as a gender identity should be, and if we are recognized, people could be able to access hormonal replacement therapy. And if people are comfortable within their bodies, they would be also be comfortable to access HIV prevention or any other services. But the main challenge is that people are not comfortable with their bodies, and the stigma starts from within ourselves, and it's very difficult for go out there and present themselves as trans masculine or trans feminine, when actually the expression or the body expression is not conforming to their preferred gender identity. So I think we need to start to advocate for the access to hormonal replacement therapy, and also to advocate for gender affirming healthcare, which also includes access and availability of hormonal replacement therapy in our facilities. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Prince. I'm seeing a hand up from Fatima. Please go ahead, Fatima.
Hi, so just adding on to what Prince said, Prince has Malawi experience, and I'm also from Malawi. I'm just adding on to his experience as a colleague. So apart from what he has mentioned, it is also a lack of knowledge that contributes to bottlenecks or gaps in access to healthcare services, because mostly we tend to include TGs in an MSM population subgroup without really understanding that their needs are different or may be different. So there's lack of knowledge for TG tailored healthcare services versus MSMs, and we tend to just include them in MSM, which is not right. And at the same time, this also speaks to how, when we conducting population size estimates or BBS, we tend not to include TGs specifically. We have this year made progress with including TG women in our BBS, but definitely there's a lot of need for including TG men, because we need to understand both populations. So lack of knowledge, I think, is also key as a key problem. Apart from that, lack of knowledge on the part of the healthcare workers that provide the services. So let me mention that in Malawi, in the pre-service training, including in-service training, KP information or related topics are not included. So you have healthcare workers that are graduating from school, they start work in facilities and they do not have any clue about KP generally, let alone TG. And that has been a problem. And we try to conduct in-service trainings, but we cannot cover most of the parts of the country or the whole country. And this is why, if you saw in the chat box, I asked if there could be any studies that have done on the prevalence of HIV in TG men, so that we really justify the inclusion of TG men in our studies of BBS. Zambia is actually planning one for 2024. So we planning to include TG men. So it would be very helpful if you share some literature or some studies that have done on HIV prevalence in TG men. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that, Fatima. I'm going to include the link to our trans men and HIV policy brief in the chat in a minute. And that has got an extensive reference section, which refers to all of the available research that we could find with regards to trans men and HIV prevalence. And I hope that that will be helpful. But yes, there's a big data gap and we do need more research. I see your hand, Eric, before I go on to your query, we've got a couple of questions in the chat that have come up in the chat. The one which is with regards to a differentiation between men who have sex with men in the trans community. Yes, there is often a lot of confusion between the trans community and men who have sex with men. In fact, there's no link between gender identity and sexual orientation, but there's still a lot of confusion between the two communities. And then there was a follow-up question about programming in terms of having drop-in centers, whether it's advisable to add specific drop-in centers for the trans and gender diverse community, or to have those services integrated with the current MSM drop-in centers. With regards to that, I can say that it will obviously differ in terms of available resourcing and on the country context. But what I can say is that MSM drop-in clinics are sometimes unfriendly spaces, particularly for trans women. And so that if you are going to be integrating services for the trans community into an existing MSM program, you need to be doing that in close collaboration with the trans community and with trans-led organizations to make sure that those are welcoming spaces and that they're actually addressing the needs of the trans and gender diverse community. Because a lot of the time we find people being expected to go to an MSM clinic, which is providing a very masculine space that trans women are not feeling comfortable in, and are also providing materials that are not speaking to the specific needs of trans and gender diverse persons. So collaboration with community-based organizations is really key in deciding how to do that programming and ensuring that those spaces are shaped in such a way that they are diverse community. And now to hand over to Eric. Over to you, Eric.
Yeah, thanks, Anil. Mine is not a question per se, but to ask for resources. I noted when Nelly was presenting, there was an indication that they also got support from Positive Vibes on community-led monitoring. I would want to ask for support to access the resources on community-led monitoring. I work for UNAIDS here in Malawi, and we have a community-led monitoring program. And I think their resources could also strengthen our CLM here in Malawi. So it was just a request for such a resource. Thank you, and over.
Thanks so much for that, Eric. And yes, I mean, one of the aims of this space is to link different organizations that might be able to learn from each other and share resource information. So I'm sure that we can connect you with Nelly and with other people who are engaging in community-led monitoring, and you can share resources and support each other in the work.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. There was another question in the chat with regards to the integration of hormone therapy into HIV services. Yes, in a lot of countries, Africa, it is not available at the moment. I can speak from the South African context. We've now started some projects that are integrating HIV and gender affirming healthcare services, and they are having a lot of success in terms of having clinics. I think they've got them now in 4 or 5 cities around South Africa. And those clinics are operating very well. And this is also something that's had a lot of success internationally. There's clinics around the world that combine these services. And if you're looking for resources on that, the Tangerine Clinic in Thailand has got extensive research that they've done on this subject and resources available on their website. And that's another useful community-led resource that's available. I'm seeing a hand from B. Over to you, B.
So I just wanted to also give a hands up when it comes to hormonal therapy. I think we need to be strategic as trans people. That's why from our aspect in Zimbabwe, we're trying to push for gender affirming, so it doesn't become like we're recruiting people and giving them injection for them to be women, for them to be men. This is the cultural background. So I don't know from the other context of your countries, but from our country, what we have learned was to let's use gender affirming, because everybody, basically, if a cis woman, she needs that as a gender affirming. There are a lot of things.
I'm not sure, colleagues, I'm having trouble to hear B at the moment. I'm not sure if it's my connection or hers.
I'm also struggling to hear B. B, perhaps could you please type in the chat? We can't hear you clearly.
Yeah. I think we may have lost B, but just to say and follow up to that, I think that was an important point that B was raising, is that first of all, diverse persons want gender affirming care or need gender affirming care. There are a lot of community members who don't access gender affirming care and who don't need it. There are some who do, and there are different types of gender affirming care. And not all trans people want or need hormones, but having services that are not specific to hormones, but are looking more at a holistic gender affirming package, I think that is the recommendation that B was making, and that's a very important point. I'm just checking, are there any other questions in the chat that have not been covered? I think we've covered everything that's in the chat. I'm not sure if there's anyone else with any questions or comments at this point. Nelly, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for the comments and interesting questions on the chat. I just wanted to maybe answer a question from Tony from SSLN. They said, is it necessary to have a drop-in center specific to trans people, or should we integrate trans-specific services into existing drop-in centers intended for MSM? And I think you answered it quite well when you said, I think what we are looking for is an overall holistic approach to inclusion and to providing a service to everyone, honestly. So this has been a very interesting conversation. I am excited that I got an opportunity to represent in Botswana and also share my experiences from the ground to say we have big steps, we have a long way to go, but with small steps, strategic engagements like this one, we can learn a lot from each other. As trans people, we're not looking for special care. We are looking to be to be respected, to be treated with humanity, to be treated with integrity. Like, I think overall, that is what we are looking for. Thank you, Anil.
Thank you so much, Nelly. And I think that if no one else has any questions or comments, that's a fantastic point to leave it on, because I think you've just summed it up very, very well. Just to say, in terms of the resources that we've mentioned here in the meeting today, we are going to be sharing the links with everyone who's been in this meeting so that you can access them. And also, please feel free to contact us and we will be able to link you to anyone who might be able to connect you to resources or send you other information. I'm now going to hand over to the South-South Learning Network team, who are going to be doing a Mentimeter survey for us to look at particular topics going forward and particular issues that we'd like to focus on. So over to you.
Thank you, Anil, and thank you to all of our speakers from Botswana, Malawi, Cote d'Ivoire, and Zimbabwe. That was a really great session. Now we will be participating in a Mentimeter exercise. So could you please scan the QR code on the screen or join menti.com and use the code 64320122. I'll give everyone a minute to join the Mentimeter. And we just want to gauge your insights on what the most significant barriers that hinder effective programming for the transgender and gender diverse community in your country are. So I'll give everyone just a minute to join the Mentimeter. The link to the Mentimeter is also in the chat. Lack of hormones. National policy recognizing trans. So a lot of answers around the legal environment, the policy environment, social, cultural, and legal environment, lack of knowledge on TGD. I'm gonna wait for a few more answers. I see we also have some answers in French. The political and socio-cultural barriers limit access to services, difficulties in accessing employment for transgender people, making them socioeconomically vulnerable. Lack of sensitization training. Obstacles linked to identity recognition. Thank you so much for all of these answers. I think they tie into what all of our speakers have already spoken on. Have another answer on not having an enabling policy and legal environment. Thank you so much. I think we can move on to the next question. Still on the same link. Which other topics related to programming for transgender and gender diverse people are you interested in learning more about? As Anil had mentioned at the beginning of the session, that this is the first of many sessions on this topic. And so we would like to know what other subjects you would like us to cover in future sessions. Please type your questions, type your answers rather. Okay, so we already have some answers. We have definition of a PMA for this target. Issues relating to PrEP for the transgender community. Trans-specific prevention service package. Thank you. How to deal with legal challenges facing the transgender community, Transgender 101. GATE also does offer a Transgender 101 course, which we will be sharing the link to. Oh, I see Anil has already shared the link in the chat, so please feel free to engage with that course. How other countries manage to change the legal environment. Please keep typing in your answers. And we will take note of all of these and coordinate with GATE to organize sessions centered around these topics. I'll give you a few more minutes. Here we have an answer coming from the chat. The religious context. Advancing policy reform, self-determination versus detransitioning, body positivity, social transitioning in a digital space. Another answer, benchmarking from countries that have managed to change the legal environment to be inclusive of trans persons. Thank you so much for all of your answers. If we don't have any more answers, then I will be handing over to Anil, who'll be doing the closing remarks. However, to our country champions, please feel free to reach out to yourselves if there are any other topics related to the transgender community that you would like to learn more about. Thank you.
Thank you so much. In closing, I just want to say that we really appreciate the time that everyone has given us today. So first of all, to our partner organizations in country, thank you so much to all of you who have shared your knowledge here today and who have shared the amazing work that you're doing. We know that you're often working in very hostile contexts, that you're often working with a very limited amount of funding, and you're doing amazing work. We appreciate you very much. Thank you also to all of the organizations that joined and participated in the conversation here today, and we're looking forward in future sessions to hearing more about the other countries in the African region and what they're doing with regards to this. Thank you to all of the officials from Ministries of Health. Thank you to all the healthcare providers, the doctors, the nurses, the psychologists, all of you from the health sector who've joined us today. Thank you all to all of you who have joined us from different civil society organizations. You've given your time to this topic, and we really appreciate your interest, and we're looking forward to continuing to engage with you. And then finally, to say thank you to the team at South-South Learning Network. Thank you so much for making this possible. This was a fantastic space to be in, and we very much appreciate you.